Hi, my name is Hannah Modlin, and I did my midterm project about the lack of representation of African American women in politics. So, I was drawn to this topic because I've always felt that politically our country just lacks diversity. Um, for the most part, the people who run this country in a political standpoint are white men who have money, and women make up most of this country, and so there needs to be more women involved in politics, holding political offices, especially women of color. Um, Also, I'm an African American woman myself, and so this issue is very important to me. And I just feel like, having a lack of diversity in politics isn't good for most Americans just because there's a lot of marginalized communities that whose needs aren't taken care of, and their needs aren't addressed because we have people running the country who ultimately don't know what it's like to be in that position. Um, and so, yeah, there's not enough women in politics, especially all women, but especially minority women. And so I talked a lot about on my poster about representational intersectionality, um, which is a specific application of intersectionality concerned with the role that widely shared depictions of groups in popular media and culture play in producing and reinforcing social hierarchy. Um, these representations are the basis for widely held group stereotypes that influence public opinion and voter decision making. So, in the political context, this includes campaigns and policy debates that have important implications for descriptive representation and material policy outcomes. Um, so, the failure of feminism to integrate race means that the resistance strategies of feminism will also replicate and reinforce the subordination of people of color, and the failure of anti-racism to integrate patriarchy means that anti-racism will frequently reproduce this subordination of women. Um, and so, yeah, I felt that um, this topic was just really interesting. I mean, I learned a lot myself. Um, throughout my life, I haven't been aware of a lot of African American women who have been in politics, like other than Michelle Obama. I learned a lot about Shirley Chisholm, who um, she was the first African American woman elected into Congress in 1968, which is a huge milestone. And she was a co-founder of the National Women's Political Caucus in 1971. She was the first African American woman to run for president in 1972. And she became the first Black woman and second woman ever to serve on a powerful House Rules Committee in 1977. I also learned a lot about Constance Baker Motley, and she was the first African American woman to argue a case before the Supreme Court. The case was Meredith versus Fair in 1962. And in 1965, she entered New York elected politics, becoming the first African American woman in the state Senate and the first woman elected Manhattan borough president. And she was the first African American woman to serve as a federal judge from 66 to 2005, which I think is amazing. And of course, I talked a lot about Michelle Obama. I'm sure everybody knows who that is, of course. And I also I also found it a little bit disturbing some of the statistics that I had learned. To this day, there have been 12,348 individuals to serve in Congress, and only 366 of out of those 12,000 plus people have been women. Only 47 have been African American women, 20 have been Hispanic women, 13 Asian Pacific American women, and 2 Native American women, which is a huge problem. And 73% of elected officials are men. 90% of those men are white men, and 90% are have been men. Okay, and 60% of them are white men. That's what I meant to say. And so, bottom line, political representation is extremely important for everybody. Like I've already said, it's important because people of color, women and women of color, people of color, they're able to bring personal experiences and identities to the table when doing policy making. And white men couldn't possibly be able to understand these experiences or these identities because they don't experience those things. And a lot of women in Congress, in politics, also see themselves as being a voice for the voiceless. So they make a point to make sure to represent children, the economically disadvantaged, immigrants, people of color, the unborn, and others whose interests have not been adequately represented in Congress. And women of color, in particular, seek to bring minority voices into policymaking processes, but they also emphasize a lot of other issues. So they're able to offer perspectives reflecting the intersection of race and gender that are distinct from those of white women and men of color. It's important to keep intersectionality in mind when thinking about African American women, because they are women and they're African American. And so they just have viewpoints that, African American men and white women, they have experiences that those two groups of people also don't have. And so, bottom line, numbers matter. Numbers validate perceptions of inequality. Numbers illuminate the sites for and the extent of those disparities. Numbers demonstrate how much work we have left to do. And numbers are power in making the case for change. So, bottom line, having a more diverse group of people involved with policy making just benefits everybody as a whole, especially those in impoverished communities, marginalized communities, and just people in general who are oppressed. And yeah, also women do just play an essential role in electing our political leaders, because women do vote at higher rates and in higher numbers than male counterparts do. And a lot of women's votes have decided the outcome of recent elections. So, women's political participation should not stop at just casting ballots. They have rightful places at decision-making tables, whether in councils, boards, or in our state and federal legislators. And so, just in general, bottom line, political representation is just incredibly important. And, more people, I really liked doing this topic because I think a lot of people can agree that they want to see a change in who, are in these offices, who runs this country. And even looking at our current state, there's just a lot of decisions that government officials are making that don't benefit a lot of people, especially those in impoverished communities and marginalized communities. So bringing in different people and with different ideas, different voices, seriously will help everybody. And so, yeah, and that is my project. I hope you all enjoyed listening. Thank you.